Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... In this episode, I'm reviewing the final Halloween-themed horror book of the year. And I really wish I could have got this to you like about a week ago, but as I said in my previous videos, I recently quit my day job because it was nothing more than a toxic cesspool. So for the last 2 weeks, I've been pretty busy doing some hardcore job hunting, and one of my good friends brought to my attention about a position that was open, so I applied for that position and I got it, which I'm really happy to start this job because it really feels like this is going to be a place that I will be proud to work for. Now, as far as my videos are concerned, this will be good because it allows me to listen to more audiobooks as I have to do a commute that's about an hour coming and going, so I'll definitely have additional time for that. But a downside might be I might not be able to do deep dives in my videos as much because of just time happening. Like, I'm going to be juggling my day job, personal life, and then of course my pleasure reading and doing these videos. So if a few reviews come up that aren't as detailed as others, please forgive that. But anywho, this weekend I'm reviewing the final installment to the Pine Deep trilogy by Jonathan Maberry, which this book is called Bad Moon Rising. And I'm not gonna lie, when I started this, I was really impatient, and because of me being that way, it felt like the beginning and middle drug a little bit. Which, the reason why I was so impatient is because Maberry is awesome when it comes down to a kick-ass ending. And I just was wanting to get to that grand finale a lot sooner than what I did, but that doesn't mean this is a bad book, it just simply means I'm impatient, and that's something I'm gonna have to deal with. Now, with that said, let's go in and head off to Pine Deep during the spookiest season of the year and see what happens as the red wave approaches. Bad Moon Rising by Jonathan Maberry picks up immediately after the showdown at the Guthrie farm, which, because of the abnormalities that happen here, this causes a few more of our protagonists to realize that they are dealing with supernatural forces. And while Vic and Ruger are continuing to build their army of the damned so they can strike on Halloween night, Newton does some pretty hardcore online research and comes across a professor by the name of Dr. Jonathan Corbell, who is a specialist when it comes down to the supernatural. Then, as Jonathan is brought into the war of good versus evil, she educates our protagonist on how they can bring down these creatures of the night and win the war. Which, as Halloween and the Red Wave approaches, we discover quite a few secrets have been hidden throughout this town. In the Pine Deep trilogy, we meet a supernatural villain known as Ubel Griswold, yet we eventually learn his real name is Peter Stump. Aside from his fictionalized presence in this series, in real life, Peter Stump was a German serial killer who was accused of witchcraft, cannibalism, and being a werewolf. He was born in 1535 and died in 1589 and was known as the Werewolf of Bedburg, where he allegedly murdered 18 people. It was said that while Stump was in werewolf form, his left forepaw was cut off. Then, when he returned to human form, locals saw his left hand was missing, which indicated he was the monster. Stump's case has been known as the most famous in werewolf history. While being tortured, he confessed to practicing black magic since he was 12, and in exchange for worldly pleasures, he sold his soul to the devil, who had given him a magical belt so he could transform into a werewolf. However, no belt was ever found. After more torture was threatened, Stump confessed to the murder of 18 people, 2 of which were pregnant women who he claimed to have eaten their unborn children. Included in his crimes was the cannibalism of his own son that he bore through having sexual relations with his daughter. Stump, his daughter, and his mistress were all executed on October 31st, 1589. His flesh was ripped from his body with hot pincers, his limbs were broken with the blunt side of an axe, and he was beheaded, then burned. His daughter and mistress had been flayed and strangled. Fun facts! In the Pine Deep trilogy, we eventually learn that there are different breeds of vampires and werewolves. So here's a little bit more information on those subjects. While in Bad Moon Rising it mentions a Japanese vampire, Japan didn't technically have a traditional vampire figure as what people may imagine. Instead, Japan has a figure known as the Nura-Onna, who is one of the supernatural beings of Japanese folklore. The name itself translates into the drenched or wet woman. It is said that the Nura-Onna has a snake's body and a woman's head, and she drains her victim's blood with her serpent's tongue. The Chilean vampire, also known as the Pechuin, is a creature that can instantly change into anything. And while its most popular form is that of a winged serpent, its gaze is known to paralyze its prey so it can suck their blood. The Vodkolak of Serbia is created one of two ways. One is that he is under 20 and has had incest with his mother, or he was a murderer who died. Another way is that he was slain by a werewolf, or he ate from an animal slain by a werewolf. After 7 years, this creature dies, then is reborn as human. A way to kill this breed is to stab it in the stomach with a stake of hawthorn, cover its hair in tar, and burn it to ash. In Belarus, the Jurtovec is a traitor, a werewolf, or a witch who is doomed to rise as a vampire after their death. Each night it rises after midnight and hunts until sunset, where it will drink the blood of human or animal. To kill this creature, one must lure it back to its grave with a trail of poppy seeds, then nail it to its coffin through its heart. A dumpire is an offspring born of one parent being human and the other being a vampire, where in most cases the father is a vampire, and in most lore, unless the dumpire gives in to its bloodlust, it grows to become a vampire hunter. Among their abilities, they are not as affected by the typical items that repel vampires. Also, they have heightened senses, inhuman recovery, a long lifespan, superhuman strength, sorcery abilities, and psychic powers. Whereas other folklore contradicts these traits, one of which being the lifespan aspect, where some believe a dumpire has a short lifespan. Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoilers section, which, if you haven't read this book before, I'm about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you would like to click away, all you have to do is just scroll down to the comments, and you'll see that I have a comment pinned at the top, where if you click the timestamp in that comment, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this, so ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about a few of my favorite moments. First off was the intense scene when Eddie confronted Mike inside of the store known as the Crow's Nest. Now, this whole time, Eddie had been trying to kill Mike because Griswold convinced him that Mike was the Antichrist and he was the right hand of God who was going to smite him down. Well, since they had been playing cat and mouse this whole time, Eddie finally had the opportunity to see Mike. So at this point, he knows who he's hunting for. However, when he goes into the Crow's Nest, the powers that be calls it where Mike is covered because Eddie gets this blurred vision where he can see everything except Mike. So he's really uncertain who he's talking to here. But he ends up questioning Mike, and Mike is scared as hell, but he keeps his cool and answers Eddie's questions to the best of his ability. Then, after they're done, Eddie even tells Mike that he's a good boy. Then when he leaves the store, he thinks he didn't feel anything evil about that kid. He's just a good kid who is doing what he's supposed to. Now, I do believe that had Eddie walked into the crow's nest and his vision had not been blurred, things would have gone very different for Mike. So, when I started reading this moment, I was on the edge of my seat because I knew things were going to go south. And I really didn't know if it was going to be Mike or Eddie who was going to suffer here, which at this point, I honestly did not think that Eddie was as evil as Vic or Ruger, because I took into consideration that Griswold was manipulating him, and I thought he had the potential to redeem himself, which of course eventually I'm proven wrong on that. But overall, this is just one of those many moments of the series where I couldn't turn away or breathe a sigh of relief until it was actually over. The next moment that really stood out to me was when Val and Dr. Weinstock tested Mark to see if he was a vampire. Now, at this point, Malcolm and Lemastra had gone to the farmer's market to stock up on everything garlic related. Like, they had garlic bulbs, garlic oil, garlic gel caps, and the list continues from there. But once they load their guns with these bullets that they had anointed in garlic oil, Dr. Weinstock draws Val's blood and she squirts it in Mark's mouth. And after a few minutes pass where nothing happens, Val thinks it's safe, so she kisses Mark on the forehead. But this is when Mark comes to, grabs her by the hair, pulls her head back, and gets ready to bite into her throat. Then, as Pharaoh, Lemastra, and Dr. Weinstock are trying to save the day, Malcolm grabs a garlic bulb and throws it at Mark's face where it hits him in the eye, which this is just enough time that Val needed so she could grab the gun and shoot Mark in the face with some garlic oil bullets. Okay, although I knew Mark was a vampire before it was revealed, I have to admit that Maberry made me doubt myself here, because when a few minutes had passed after Mark had received Val's blood and nothing had happened, I was like, okay, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe he's not a bloodsucker. So for this reason, I truly have to applaud Maberry for tricking me into letting my guard down. Also, this was one of those high-action moments which, in my opinion, Maberry is the king of orchestrating. My final favorite moment was the grand reveal of Uble Griswold. Now, before we actually see him, all of the vampires have run off to Dark Hollow because it's time for his resurrection. However, as they're celebrating, all of these tentacles erupt from the ground that have like fangs all over them, and they start killing off some of the vampires because Griswold still needs more carnage in order to rise. Then, when he finally does emerge from his burial, we see he's turned into this 15-foot tall monstrous thing with goat legs. And while he has a human torso, the skin on that torso is not human. Instead, it's this really nasty patchwork of rat fur and dog fur that has like maggots all in it. So, yeah, it's pretty nasty. Then, instead of him having a human head, he has this gargoyle type of head that has tusk and snake fangs, and on top of his head, he has this really huge nest of snakes. The imagery here really exceeded my expectations because I honestly thought that Griswold was going to look like nothing more than just this emaciated zombie. But no, this was something that I did not expect whatsoever, and I was really happy to see that Maberry really gave us an original creature design that felt like it was true nightmare fuel. And even though I really did appreciate all of the violence and the action that surrounded this reveal, the image of Griswold will haunt me for a lifetime. In the video I did for Ghost Road Blues, I bitched about Vic and Ruger, but in this episode, I would like to bask in the glory of how wonderful it was to see these two bastards eat shit. And to make it even better, they suffered. Like, for example, Vic ended up getting the ever-loving living hell burnt out of him, and he goes running off to the hospital crying like a little bitch. Then, after he's been there for a hot minute, he attacks Jonathan, which, luckily enough, she knows how to make him hurt, so she slaps him on his burns. And because of the pain this causes, this pig bastard runs into the hall with his little cocktail weenie tucked between his legs, where he gets his ass blown away, and the world becomes a better place. Then we have Ruger, who is just this smug son of a bitch who thinks he is king shit. But before he can do any more damage, Terry attacks him, which at this point Terry is a werewolf, so he rips Ruger a new asshole. Then, after that goes down, Malcolm ends up grabbing a sword, he cuts off Ruger's hand, and then he stabs him in the chest and cuts his heart in two. And once again, the world becomes a better place. Also, I would like to add that I was really happy to see Eddie suck it, mostly because he had the opportunity to redeem himself and he didn't do that. Plus, he really just seemed like this uptight, judgmental, religious nutjob who really needed to get laid. And to be honest, he reminded me of one of my great uncles, which, as you can imagine, I didn't like him either. Bad Moon Rising by Jonathan Maberry was a great way to end this trilogy, and among the characters that I had grown to love, I was happy to see that we gained some more well-developed protagonists. Aside from them, this book focuses on the subjects that I already covered in my reviews for Ghost Road Blues and Dead Man's Song. But adding on to those subjects, this final installment really focuses on ethnic cleansing as well as evil dictatorship. Character-wise, I really loved how we had the opportunity to get to know Jonathan's character, which from the moment she stepped onto page, I honestly felt like she had a huge heart, but at the same time, I could tell that she was not a person to mess with. Also, I absolutely adored how she felt like this walking encyclopedia for everything regarding supernatural lore. Plus, it was really cool throughout this series to see the celebrity name drops like Ken Foree, Brink Stevens, Joe Bob Briggs, and the list continues. Which, even though it was fun to see their names dropped for the Halloween festivities throughout the series, I honestly did not expect that we were going to receive character development for these persons in the final installment. So when I discovered they actually had page time, I totally fanboyed out. Also, I kind of feel like I fell off my A game a little bit, because when I was reading Dead Man's Song and it name-dropped Peter Stump, I was kind of like, that sounds familiar, but I really didn't think too much of it. Then when I started Bad Moon Rising, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I had read about him a few years ago in a nonfiction serial killer book. So it was really cool to see how he was fictionalized for this series. Theme-wise, we have the topic of ethnic cleansing that floats in and out of this series. But if you've missed the overall point, by the time you get to Bad Moon Rising, it literally spells everything out. Yet, instead of us having where there is the ethnic cleansing of one race, we see where Griswold and his soldiers want to rid the world of all human beings so they can rule over everything. Which, by how this is presented, it seems like the author is showing us how people who want world domination or want to do ethnic cleansing aren't even good enough to be called human beings. Instead, they're literal monsters. Tied into this subject is the theme of evil dictatorship, which, at the end of the day, Griswold might as well have been Hitler because of his white supremacy and how he wants to rise as a god. Also, while he has all of his soldiers doing his dirty work, he promises to them that they will reign as a superior race with him over world domination. Meanwhile, we see that he treats his recruits as expendable due to how he uses them for self-gain. Overall, Bad Moon Rising didn't scare me, gross me out, or creep me out. However, it was extremely intense. Like, in my opinion, Maberry knows how to present a really damn good climax at the end of his books. And because of how he ended book 1 and 2, I had extremely high hopes for how this trilogy would end. Which Maberry did not disappoint whatsoever, because when all hell broke loose, It didn't just break loose for a few short chapters. Instead, it was non-stop action for over 200 pages. Bad Moon Rising by Jonathan Maberry was a great finale to a kick-ass trilogy. And if you read this, you might want to keep pen and paper nearby because we have a pretty extensive cast of characters and the author frequently deep dives into accurate folklore, which by how all of this comes together, it can be a little overwhelming. But at the end of the day, I do highly recommend Bad Moon Rising, and if you're the kind of person who likes to coordinate what you read with a specific time of year, Ghost Road Blues should be read around the end of September, whereas the sequel, Dead Man's Song, should be read around the beginning of October, and Bad Moon Rising should be read about the middle or end of October. Now, keep in mind, each of these books are well over 400 pages long, so coordinate as you see fit. On to the questions. What is a horror book trilogy that you would recommend? Also, this question really isn't going to be a deep discussion or anything like that, and you're probably going to laugh at it, but do you like garlic? If so, load me up with some recipes because I love garlic. Like, I put it in everything from spaghetti to pizza to gumbo to stew to chili. The list continues. Also, I really love roasted garlic, so that's another thing on my list. But yeah, totally load me up with some good garlic recipes and I will be completely happy. Now that it's time to close out, I would like to thank these wonderful people for contributing to my Patreon account. Here's a list of my Patreon contributors, and as you can see, some of them are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon account as well, I do have a link available in the description section of this episode, and for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. If there's a certain profession you would like to have tied to your name, just let me know and I'll include that in the shout out. Also, I do have a second tier available where for $10 a month, you'll still receive the shout out that you see here, but I also do creepy photography on the side, so at the beginning of every month, I'll send you over one of my creepy photos, and from there you can print it off, do whatever you like. So if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can have a good time together. Also, if you would like to hunt me down on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are all in the description section of this episode. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell because I have more book reviews coming in the near future. So until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.